Hey guys, today we are going to do some vertical up TIG welding. And there's basically two ways that you can do vertical up TIG welding, and one of them is freehand. So basically just the same type of technique that you'd use on a horizontal weld, you would use on vertical up, which has a lot to do with body positioning and things like that. And then the other way, of course, is walking the cup. A lot of people that I know walk the cup vertical up. Because it's easy that way. I tend to think of it as a crutch that is a good skill to have, walking the cup in general. But I don't think that you should rely on that only for being able to do out of position welding, because you're going to get a much larger weld with walking the cup in terms of the width of the weld bead. And also there's times where you might be welding on like brushed stainless or brushed aluminum or something like that, where you can't mar up the surface of the material. So especially like polished stainless steel or something like that. So I think especially if you're looking to get into TIG welding as a profession, you should definitely be able to do freehand TIG welding in all positions and walking the cup. So just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to take you through both freehand vertical up today on carbon steel and walking the cup vertical up on carbon steel. We're just going to do T-joints today, keep it simple, and hope you enjoy this video. All right, so we're set up here for our freehand demonstration, and I have my T-joint set at a height that's comfortable for me. You know, you're not always going to be able to be in control of this, in a fabrication type scenario. But if we're just practicing this, we want it at a height that's going to be most comfortable for us. So I have it at a height to where when I start, it's at a comfortable position and I'm going to be able to see the weld pool. And when I end, I'm also at a comfortable position and can see the weld pool. So the thing to keep in mind with out of position welding is that we want to keep all of our angles and the general technique the same. So if I was welding this in the horizontal position, I'd want about a 20-degree push angle and approximately a 45-degree work angle. And so for vertical up, that's going to be the same. And the problem that we run into a lot with vertical welding is that we tend to change that travel angle. So we start out at a good 20-degree push angle, and as we start to go through the joint, typically we'll go to an even more extreme push angle. And that's when you start to get changes in the profile of the weld. As you get to the top, you'll start to see the end of your filler metal balling up because you're starting to point the arc at the end of the filler metal rather than into the base material. So we really want to be cognizant of that and try to keep that 20-degree push angle locked in all the way up the joint. Now, another thing for freehand is that if you can, you want to rest your fingers on the material, and that's going to keep all of those things consistent, like your angle, your distance, your arc spacing and stuff like that. So one thing that can be helpful is to use like a thicker glove on your torch hand, like a thicker gauntlet style glove. Or you can use a TIG finger because it is going to get hot, especially vertical up. It's a little slower. The material is going to get hot. If you're fairly seasoned TIG welder and you can move quickly, then you can get through it a lot of times. But especially on stainless steel, aluminum, that stainless is going to hold the heat. Aluminum, the heat's going to travel throughout the part real quickly. A lot of times you'll need to use a TIG finger on that to save your fingers. So, and be able to get through the weld with a nice consistent bead. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's run this bead. All right, so there's your freehand vertical up. And one thing that I forgot to mention is I like to put my cable over my shoulder so it takes the weight off of the torch. And you know, you don't constantly have this weight that's pulling down and possibly making you change your angle. So it takes all the weight off the torch, and it makes it really easy just to adjust any angles with your fingers as we go up. And then, of course, it's nice to be able to rest your filler rod hand on something as well. So, you know, in a fabrication situation, normally you're resting this on the part itself. So if you're just practicing, you can simulate that by, you know, having a plate or a positioner or something to rest both of your hands on, and your weld will come out much more consistent that way. Okay, so that's it. We're going to set up for the walking the cup demonstration now. All right, so here we go for our walking the cup vertical up. And I've moved my, my setup a little bit. I've got to move it closer to the edge of the table here so that I have clearance for the handle. That's one thing with walking the cup, is that, you know, if you start to hit the edge of the part with your fingers on the handle of your TIG torch, that's going to be a problem. So I've got it positioned to where I can get all the way through without getting hung up. I'm getting hung up on my pedal. Without getting hung up here. And another thing that you can do is you can use the pedal with walking the cup, but you know, if you're practicing walking the cup out of position for like pipe welding, you're going to be using lift arc. So you're going to be locked in that in the amperage that you have. You're not going to have any adjustability there with your amperage, but you're not going to be bound to the foot pedal. You know, so you can just keep right on welding with that lift arc, and you know, but you really have to be good about finding the right amperage, you know, to where you're not too low and not too high. So this is my setup for walking the cup, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the actual technique. So you know, the actual technique of walking the cup would be like lifting up one side and setting down, this sort of like figure eight sort of motion with walking the cup. And that's what you're going to do on, you know, TIG welding pipe, you know, that sort of thing. For this T-joint, though, you can really just do like a side-to-side shimmy. And as you go side to side, it's going to naturally just walk up the surface, especially if it's smooth. And what I find is that you get a more consistent size to your bead. And it fills in a little bit more. You get a better profile than if you actually do that traditional walking the cup, you know, barrel scoot type thing. So we're just going to do a little shimmy side to side to get our bead all the way up. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this. All right, so there you have it, both your vertical up freehand and your vertical up walking the cup. One thing that I forgot to mention before I started the vertical up is how important your tungsten spacing is and the size of your cup. And the reason why it's important is because you need you know, the proper radius of a cup to be able to comfortably and easily perform that walking. So for this particular joint, I did a size 7. It worked perfectly. It had a good radius and a good offset from the plate. So that's the one that I ultimately chose. But you know, if I'm doing like an open groove on pipe, I may be anywhere from a size 5 cup up to a 10 or a 12, depending on the size of that groove weld. So it's different for different configurations of joints. And then as far as my my stick out for my tungsten, typically what I'll do is I'll start off with basically the start of my grinding on my tungsten, I will make that in line with the end of my cup. So it's just barely, sticking out. And then I'll come up to the plate and I'll just do a dry run going back and forth with my walking. And I'll see if the tip of the tungsten is off, the plate enough to allow room for the filler metal and for the, for the weld pool not to come up and hit the tungsten. And sometimes I'll have to do a little adjustment and recess it even more so that as I go to each side, that tungsten is not hitting, the sides of the plate or the weld pool. And then another thing that I should have mentioned when I started off is that this is a lay rod technique. So when we're welding, we are actually laying the rod there, but it's not, you just don't lay the rod there and just leave it alone. You have to have this downward pressure pushing it into the weld pool as you're advancing forward. Otherwise, you're going to get where the filler rod is balling up and it's not flowing into the weld pool. You're just kind of intermittently melting it into the weld pool, and it's not going to look neat and consistent. So you have to push it in and keep this forward pressure in a lay rod technique. Okay, so there you have it. Easy, right? It does take some practice, but you do it, practice makes perfect. Keep doing it and you'll be able to put down some consistent welds. So hopefully this helps you if you're having to do some vertical up, some out of position welding with TIG. And don't forget, if you please like this video if you like it, and subscribe to the channel for more content.